Revenge with Karen.
I knew the company was broken the day I found a cease and desist draft in the office printer tray, still warm, never signed, buried under someone's salad coupon. It was mine, and it was urgent. Someone had started selling knockoffs of our product line, using our brand name, our images, even our damn shipping label templates. I'd stayed late 3 nights straight drafting the letter myself, because legal was too busy redlining executive bonus agreements. I slipped it under the general counsel's door with a sticky note. Needs signature today. It was still there 2 days later, unread, unsent. That's when I realized I wasn't just a legal ops manager. I was a firewall with a badge that said just admin. Nobody asked me to take this stuff on. Nobody offered me a raise or a title or even a decent chair. But I saw the gaps. I saw what would happen if we let this stuff slide. So I started patching holes where I could, flagging supplier contracts that felt off, copying legal on weird IP references in influencer posts, drafting letters with language borrowed from cease and desists I'd read at midnight over stale pad thai. My reward? A warning from the founder's new favorite golden girl, his daughter, freshly minted chief strategy officer, to stay in my lane. Said with a smile, of course, said like I was a nosy temp who'd wandered into the war room with a coffee tray and too many questions. Real quick, before this goes further, if you're into stories where corporate egos implode and the quiet ones get the last word, take a second to like this and hit subscribe. 95% of folks who listen never do, but trust me, it helps the team more than you know, especially when we're out here chronicling the downfall of nepotism one HR disaster at a time. Anyway, I didn't push back, not when she smirked in meetings, not when she cut me out of legal routing chains I'd literally built. I just kept working, quietly, methodically. I tracked infringement cases. I flagged counterfeit resellers. I kept a spreadsheet of every draft that needed formal review and who was ghosting me. 3 of those letters were still unsent the week I got fired. 3. One was to a warehouse supplier overseas whose refurbished label was legally meaningless and who'd started posting TikToks about our inventory being repackaged resale. One was a takedown notice to an influencer who'd started tagging a competitor's product with our brand's name. And the third, the big one, was for a company we'd once partnered with, now selling a copycat version of our flagship product under a new name, but with our old logo still visible in the metadata of their digital assets. But that Friday, as I sat with one eye on my inbox and one hand on a half-eaten banana, I got the calendar invite for the company-wide Zoom. All-hands strategy alignment call, which is like corporate speak for buckle up. Someone's about to make a PowerPoint crime. Except there was no PowerPoint. No agenda. Just her face, center screen, unmuted, face flushed with fury like she'd been rehearsing this in the mirror with mascara, tears, and a hairbrush mic. You've been using company email for personal business. She screamed. I blinked. Then she said it again, louder, like the echo would make it true. I have proof. Erin has been using her email for non-work activities. I'm terminating her effective immediately. 200 cameras went dark. Mics went silent. Nobody said a word. Nobody even fake coughed. I leaned in, unmuted my mic, and asked one thing. Just one, did you read them? She stared at the camera like I'd spoken in Morse code. Then she smiled. Smug, victory-laced with delusion. And I walked, didn't cry, didn't beg. Just left the meeting, shut my laptop, and took a deep breath that tasted like 3 years of unpaid overtime and unsent warnings. She had no idea what she'd done. But the board would. Because the board meeting she forgot about, I set that one up. I booked the room. I drafted the talking points. I prepped the attorney. And in that very room, in just a few hours, someone was going to start reading those personal emails aloud, line by line. And that's when the fun would start. There's a special kind of silence that only happens on company Zoom calls. It's not peaceful. It's not still. It's that suffocating hush when everyone's afraid to breathe, because HR might be recording. That's the sound that followed her outburst. 200 rectangles of frozen faces, all pretending their Wi-Fi lagged at the exact same moment a grown woman in a $700 blouse threw a tantrum about unauthorized email activity. She hadn't even built up to it. No context. No preamble. Just stormed in like the star of her own soap opera and declared war on me like I'd hacked the Pentagon. You've been using company email for personal business. Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence, which would have been funny if it weren't aimed at my head, like a loaded gun. I sat there blinking, cursor hovering over my mute button, wondering which email she thought was personal. When I sent at 11:38 p.m. about the counterfeit warehouse using our recycled product labels, or the 14-page takedown draft I wrote in a Google Doc and then copy-pasted into Outlook because our legal doc system was down again, she kept going. You think we wouldn't notice? This is a breach of trust. I'm terminating you, effective immediately. Still no PowerPoint. Still no witnesses. Just her yelling like she was auditioning for a reality show no one wanted to fund. The founder, her father, was on the call, but he said nothing. Just stared down at something out of frame, probably his phone or a pre-written script. Either he didn't care or he knew this was coming and didn't stop it. I knew what was happening wasn't legal or ethical or even particularly strategic, but I also knew no one was going to stop her, not on camera. Not in that moment. Everyone else just watched, their cursor fingers twitching near the leave meeting button like they were praying for a fire drill. I unmuted my mic. One sentence. Calm, level, did you read them? She paused just for a second. Enough to tell me she hadn't. Not a single one. She looked like someone who'd just been handed a script in the wrong language and told to perform. Then she smiled. That same smug, sorority smirk that said, "You're not important enough to be right." I clicked leave meeting. That's it. No last words, no dramatic gestures. Just one click and I was gone. I didn't slam my laptop shut, didn't cry. I even finished my coffee before I stood up. The silence in my apartment was louder than her screaming had been. It should have felt like defeat, like I'd just been exiled from a kingdom I'd helped build. But honestly, I felt relief. Not joy, not vengeance. Just stillness. Something that had been grinding against my ribs for months finally stopped. And I wasn't stupid. I knew what was coming. A flood of Slack pings, missed calls, "So sorry that happened." Messages from the same people who watched it unfold like it was the season finale of some corporate gladiator match. What she didn't know, what no one seemed to remember in all the chaos, is that the quarterly board meeting was that afternoon. The one I'd scheduled, rescheduled again because the founder had a conflict, and the COO's calendar was a logistical disaster. I'd built that agenda with our external counsel. I'd uploaded documentation to the board portal that morning, including a summary of pending legal threats I'd written myself, since the actual legal team had apparently decided to go on vacation with their deadlines. They didn't even know I was gone yet, which meant they'd open that meeting with the standard legal exposure section and someone, most likely the outside counsel, would start going through the flagged emails. The ones I'd labeled urgent IP risk and unsent legal draft. They'd read them, out loud, to the same people who just watched me get axed on Zoom by a woman whose qualifications started and ended with shared DNA. And when they did, the silence wouldn't be optional, would be the sound of something cracking open. Not just the truth, reputation, liability, control. Because if you scream fire in a crowded building, you better be damn sure you're not holding the matches. She hadn't just fired me. She'd fired the only person who knew where the fire exits were. Packing up your life in a place that never really saw you isn't emotional. It's transactional. I didn't even have a box, just a sad little tote bag with a faded zipper and 2 broken pens at the bottom. I walked into my office, past a sea of heads that pretended to look busy, each of them suddenly fascinated by spreadsheets they hadn't touched since last quarter. No one made eye contact, not even the ones I'd helped out of legal jams with whispered warnings and unofficial edits at midnight. Especially not them. My desk was always clean, no plants, no novelty mugs, no framed cats in sunglasses. Just folders, labeled, aligned. Some of them still smelled faintly like old toner and stress. I didn't take them, didn't even flip through. If they needed to dig through my drawers looking for something they didn't understand, let them try. The boomerang effect of half-digested legalese would hit hard enough without my help. I didn't delete anything. I didn't even log out. The only thing I left, centered, visible, impossible to miss, was a black USB drive, labeled in red Sharpie, pending drafts urgent. I didn't put it in a drawer. I didn't tuck it in an envelope. I left it right next to the keyboard, on top of a stack of unread memos about elevating brand synergy and integrated growth outcomes. Stuff the daughter liked to wave around in meetings like she'd invented marketing. That USB had 3 documents on it. 3 cease and desist letters, 3 legal fires I'd been trying to put out all week, while dodging passive-aggressive Slack messages, and bizarre requests from the strategy department, which, far as I could tell, was mostly about mood boards and mislabeling spreadsheets. The first draft was aimed at a direct knockoff brand operating under a slightly misspelled version of our name. Their site had gone live 3 days earlier, already pulling traffic and ranking higher than our own SEO-optimized landing pages. I'd flagged it the moment I saw it, sent a screenshot to legal. No response. So I wrote the damn letter myself. The second was for a former partner who'd taken our packaging design and pasted it onto a new product line that looked suspiciously like ours. Same specs, same materials, same shade of exclusive pearl white that marketing had trademarked after 6 rounds of color drama. Again, screenshots, flagged email, silence. The third, that one made my stomach churn. An influencer collab gone rogue, a TikTok promo campaign using our logo to hype an entirely different product. Same demographic, same pitch, different legal entity altogether. I'd warned the PR team, CC'd legal, and even looped in the COO. Not a single person responded. So I drafted 3 letters. Not just placeholders, full legalese with citations, bulletproof language, ready to print on letterhead and fire off. None had been signed. All were still sitting in limbo when I got terminated live on Zoom. The USB drive wasn't a grenade. It was a mirror. When they opened those files, if they opened them, they wouldn't find revenge or venom or some petty rant about unfair treatment. Find receipts, proof of negligence, documentation of what they hadn't done, of what I had and what I no longer would. Behind me, I could feel eyes watching. One of the junior admins, can't remember his name, kept glancing over like I might break down crying or start smashing monitors with a stapler. Sorry to disappoint, sweetheart. I'm not the tantrum type. I'm the type who finishes the damn sentence and hits save. I didn't say goodbye. Not to my team, not to legal, not to the COO who'd probably read my exit memo and think it was too dry. As I walked past reception, someone finally looked up, Alicia from facilities. She mouthed, "I'm so sorry." I gave her a nod, not out of forgiveness, just recognition. She wasn't the enemy. She was just another one trying to survive the chaos with her dignity intact. By the time I hit the street, I felt lighter. Not because I was free, not because justice had been served, but because I knew the clock had started ticking. Someone would find that drive, maybe tomorrow, maybe in 2 weeks when the product recall team needed help rewriting compliance guidelines and couldn't reach me. Maybe when the first legal threat went public and the press team scrambled to find the lady who handled that stuff. They'd plug it in, click, open, and then they'd finally read what they never bothered to ask. Every unsent letter was a story, and the last chapter, that was out of my hands now. Next on the agenda, said the board chair, tapping a highlighter against a packet no one had read, we have an update on legal exposure. Aaron's team flagged several outstanding items earlier this week, IP risk, I believe. A few nods around the table, most of them distracted. The founder was adjusting his cufflinks like he had somewhere better to be. The CFO was texting under the table. Only the outside legal counsel, a sharp, gray-eyed man who billed enough per hour to buy a Tesla every quarter, looked alert. He leaned forward and opened his binder. No one in that room knew yet. Not a single one of them realized I'd been fired just 4 hours earlier. Because the daughter, the same one who'd screamed me out of a job in front of 200 people, hadn't told anyone. Not the chair, not HR, not the company's own legal team. Gone full scorched earth without sending a single follow-up email. So when the lawyer cleared his throat and said, "Let's start with Aaron's flagged communications from earlier this week," nobody flinched. He began reading. It started small, a line from one email, unlicensed use of product design in third-party marketplace listing observed on Oct 12, recommend immediate takedown notice. The room got quieter. He kept going. Data on competitor branding suggests use of proprietary fonts and color codes sourced from internal design documents. See attached screenshots. Chairs shifted. The CFO finally looked up from his phone. Then came the third one. Preliminary language drafted for potential cease and desist regarding trademark infringement. Opposing party using our slogan with a minor alteration. Risk of brand confusion and consumer misrepresentation. Silence. Now every board member was looking up, eyes darting. Realizing this wasn't just a compliance update, it was a storm warning they'd slept through. And then a pause. The lawyer flipped a page, glanced at the footer. This one was saved but not sent. Dated 3 days ago. titled Immediate IP Action Required. He read it aloud. Every word, my words. It named names. Cited code. Outlined specific legal action. Even included a timeline. Respond within 5 business days or lose standing in a pending registration dispute. That deadline? Tomorrow. The founder's face went slack. His daughter, notably absent, was likely somewhere praising herself for decisive act of leadership while the board sat marinating in legal quicksand. Then the lawyer stopped, looked up. Were these items addressed? No one answered. The chair blinked. I assumed legal was handling it. We weren't copied on these. Lawyer replied, his voice suddenly sharp. These were flagged directly by Erin. From what I can see, she was the one drafting the responses. The COO's mouth opened, closed. I thought she was operations support. She's been monitoring legal threats for months, the lawyer said, flipping pages with increasing agitation. Who exactly owns this role now? That's when my phone buzzed. A single text. From one of the assistants still in the room. They're reading your emails. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. I poured myself a glass of water, leaned back on my couch, and stared at the ceiling like it held all the answers. The truth was out now. Not dramatic, not scandalous. Just cold, hard lines of text that proved one thing: they'd never seen the work that kept them out of court. But they were about to see what happened without it. In that boardroom, I could picture it perfectly. The growing dread, realization that they'd cut the rope while halfway across the bridge. The lawyer, reading my last draft like a posthumous letter from someone they hadn't bothered to know. I imagined the chair clearing his throat again, voice suddenly brittle. Can someone, get Erin on the line? Too late. You don't get to put the smoke back in the match after you've lit the whole damn building. The collapse didn't come all at once. It started with a single sentence, allowed by a lawyer who hadn't yet realized he was sifting through the ashes of a fire that had already been burning beneath their feet. Known counterfeiter previously flagged in Q2 reports has resumed activity under alternate branding. Recommend immediate cease and desist. The room froze. That name, Victor and Knox Co., was supposed to be dead. Shut down. Blacklisted. Months ago, we caught them repackaging defective units and selling them through ghost storefronts. I'd flagged it twice. I'd drafted a takedown twice, and I'd followed up twice. Nobody signed. Nobody replied, and now they were back. Rebranded, retooled, and already halfway through a Black Friday promo cycle, using our old promo codes and even our abandoned product photography. I'd included the screenshots, even highlighted the metadata showing our asset tags embedded in their JPEGs. It wasn't just theft, it was insult. Daylight robbery filmed in 4K while legal played ping-pong with HR over whose turn it was to order lunch. The lawyer lowered the paper, looked around. This draft isn't marked as sent. No one moved. The CFO licked his lips, said something that sounded like, we thought legal was handling that. Legal's rep blinked. We never saw this. The COO tried to redirect. Well, what about marketing's new campaign? That's been effective, traction's solid. Wrong move. Lawyer turned the page. Actually, next item. He adjusted his glasses. New consumer-facing language, guaranteed original, launched on October 10. Erin's notes, trademark application still pending. Usage may imply protection that doesn't yet exist. Potential FTC exposure. Recommend immediate rewording. Silence. And then, like a spark hitting gasoline, 2 board members sat up at once. One whispered, wait, greenlit that language for Q4 rollout. The other, and we tied that phrase into the affiliate promo codes. The lawyer nodded grimly. And from what I'm seeing, that language was deployed in digital ads starting October 12. That's public-facing trademark assertion without legal protection. If a competitor sues, and it appears one might, this puts us in a very weak position. There was no talking now. Just rustling papers, shifting chairs, low hum of someone's iPhone vibrating against the table like a ticking clock. Across town, I sat at my kitchen counter, phone upside down, watching the blinking light from the coffee maker reflect off the marble. I didn't need to be in that room to feel it. The sinking realization, the quiet dread, the unspoken truth passing between them like a disease. No one knew who had been holding it all together. Until the person holding it let go. They were just starting to understand that. What they hadn't realized, what none of them had even bothered to ask, is that for the past 6 months, I wasn't just drafting letters. I was coordinating the response calendar. I was tracking renewal deadlines for brand protections. I was the informal watchdog over language compliance, cross-referencing legal copy with marketing fluff before it became a liability. They wanted to streamline. They wanted to modernize. What they got was a company that launched legally vulnerable language into a market full of lawsuits waiting to happen. And the kicker? Some of the violations I'd flagged had statutory timelines. Days, not weeks. And some of those days had already passed. Wait, how many days has it been since that counterfeiter went live? One of them asked, desperate, like saying the number fast enough would change it. 7, the lawyer replied. The window to act before they could claim market usage. 5, Jesus Christ, the COO muttered. Somewhere in the middle of that, the founder finally spoke. Who authorized her termination? No one answered, because no one had, not officially, not in writing, not through channels. Just a tantrum, broadcast over Zoom, amplified by power, and executed without paperwork. The daughter had pulled the trigger, but she hadn't done the paperwork. And now the company was bleeding out, quietly, internally, the smile still pasted on its face. Back at my apartment, I opened my laptop. Not to check emails, not to read headlines, but to review the spreadsheet I'd kept privately of every legal draft, sent and unsent, every missed deadline, every ignored warning. The worst part? I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt tired. They hadn't burned the place down out of malice. They just never learned how to hold a match without lighting their own hair on fire. The moment the lawyer said $2 million, the energy in the boardroom shifted from corporate discomfort to primal panic. Not theoretical risk. Not some vague, maybe we'll hear from a lawyer kind of thing. Actual projected financial exposure. Real lawsuits on the table. And that was just one case. 1. The IP theft I'd flagged 3 times, each time more urgently than the last, each time ignored like I was a nuisance with a thesaurus. The infringing party, lawyer continued, has already filed a provisional mark. If they go unchallenged for much longer, we risk losing protection in 2 markets. Possibly more. And he glanced down at the binder like it had bitten him. They're citing our own marketing materials to prove brand abandonment. The COO looked like he might puke. The CFO had gone ghost white, lips moving silently like he was praying to the god of deferred accountability. But the founder just stared blankly across the table, stunned, like someone had smacked him in the back of the head with a folder full of overdue subpoenas. And then, finally, the daughter spoke. Her voice sliced through the tension like a mosquito in a hospital room, shrill, self-righteous, oblivious. She was sending personal emails. The lawyer looked up. "Excuse me, that's what this is about, right?" She said, crossing her arms like she was presenting a PowerPoint to her high school student council. It was misusing company resources. It's a violation of protocol. No, the lawyer said flatly. She was drafting unsent legal responses on your company's behalf. These are cease and desist notices, trademark protection memos, in some cases, urgent IP defense material, all stored and timestamped on company servers. The daughter blinked. She didn't have legal authority. She was documenting legal threats and drafting preliminary responses for your in-house counsel, who, based on what I've seen, didn't respond. Multiple times. She started to open her mouth again, but the board chair beat her to it. Who approved her termination? Silence. The founder looked up slowly. I wasn't aware she was fired. The chair's voice got colder. You didn't approve it? No. Eyes turned to the COO. He raised both hands like someone had drawn a gun. I didn't even know until 10 minutes ago. I assumed, I saw the Zoom invite, but I thought it was an internal HR thing. Now all eyes turned to the daughter. I acted in the company's best interest, she said. There was confusion about her role. She was overstepping. Overstepping, the chair repeated. By intercepting IP threats your legal team never responded to. She was sending emails after hours. The lawyer gave a thin smile. Yes. At 11:43 p.m., documenting brand impersonation and drafting trademark defense language. Hardly a scandal. The founder rubbed his face like he was trying to erase it. We just launched a campaign with that language, which now becomes evidence, the lawyer replied, in support of their claim that you've lost exclusive control of your mark. Back in my apartment, I was lying on the couch in a hoodie that smelled like dryer sheets and quiet victory. I wasn't glued to the board meeting, didn't need to be. Former admin had quietly leaked the conversation through a burner Teams account. I got the transcripts in real time. No video, just lines of text scrolling like an old-timey ticker tape of corporate regret. I watched the panic unfold while I refreshed stock alerts on my phone. The company's shares weren't public, but the private equity group that backed them had 3 holdings in similar sectors, and one of them was taking a hit. Not massive, not yet, but the algorithms knew something. And soon, someone would start asking why. I wasn't angry anymore, not exactly. Anger is personal. This was observational, detached, like watching a building crumble in slow motion because the foundation had been poured with glitter and vibes instead of concrete. And the irony, I'd left them a gift. A USB with the exact wording they could have used to save themselves. Plug, print, sign, send. Done. But they'd fired the person who labeled the fuse box. Now they were flicking light switches in the dark, wondering why the power was gone. And me? I just sipped my tea, watched the markets tremble, and waited for someone to remember my number. The email came through at 6:47 p.m. Subject line, quick question. Harmless on the surface. But the sender? One of the quieter board members, one who never spoke unless it involved quarterly filings or audit committee reports. Which meant this wasn't small talk. This was triage. I clicked it open. Hi, Aaron, apologies for the late message. We're reviewing recent legal activity and realized you may have documentation that didn't get formally processed. If possible, could you share any outstanding drafts or notes regarding current IP matters? No apology for what happened. No explanation, just a surgical extraction request, like asking the person you shot in the leg to kindly hand over the tourniquet. I stared at it for a second. Then I opened a folder on my desktop titled Company Backup Final. Not petty, not dramatic, just prudent. Because when you've been watching a house catch fire from the basement up, you start preparing the exit routes before anyone smells smoke. I opened a new email. Attached, I wrote, "Please find all IP-related documents drafted in the last 30 days. Each includes a timestamp, internal routing notes, and relevant screenshots. Click Attach 12 files, 6 drafts, 3 memo summaries, 2 flagged social posts, 1 buried reply from in-house legal saying, looks fine, circle back next week." Then I added a PDF, a clean timesheet I'd kept off the clock. Hours logged after 7 p.m., every week for 5 months. Tasks categorized, time noted. Not as a bid for overtime, no one had ever offered that. I just knew someday someone would ask what I actually did around here. And when they did, I wanted my answer to be unassailable. In the body of the email, I wrote one final line. For reference, these tasks were performed outside formal scope, previously deemed not worth formalizing. Estimated total, 93 hours, unpaid. Then I did something I hadn't done before. I CC'd the company's outside counsel, the high-dollar one, the one who shows up in mergers and federal filings, not in HR complaints or slap-on-the-wrist compliance issues. I didn't call anyone out, didn't mention the daughter, didn't attach the Zoom recording I had saved in case things got uglier. I didn't need to. The numbers spoke. The attachments spoke. The timestamps, they screamed. When that email landed, it was like someone dropped a rock in the middle of a glass conference table. You couldn't hear it shatter, but you felt the ripple. I know because 15 minutes later, another message came in. Same board member, this time shorter. 1 sentence. "Thank you, Aaron. We'll be in touch shortly." I pictured the room as it shifted. Phones lighting up. Legal whispering. Founder furrowing his brow as someone explained the significance of a woman he'd let his daughter humiliate in public, now holding the kind of receipts that auditors and insurers actually care about. This wasn't revenge. This was risk exposure. Documented, chronological, admissible. I didn't gloat, didn't smile. I just closed my laptop and leaned back on the couch, letting the soft hiss of the radiator fill the room. Somewhere in that boardroom, they were doing the math. 93 unpaid hours. 3 pending legal actions. 1 person who saw it all and had the paper trail to prove it. They hadn't just fired a mid-level fixer. They'd amputated a pressure valve and were now surprised by the steam building behind every wall. Let them calculate. Let them draft their damage control memos. Because once they looped in outside counsel, my outside counsel now, too, there'd be no more gaslighting, no more confusion about roles, no more pretending it was all a misunderstanding. They'd asked for the receipts. I gave them the invoice, too. By morning, the gloves were off. The transcript from the emergency late-night session leaked before sunrise, not to the press, not to the staff, but internally to people who knew how to read between lines of sanitized legalese. 2 board members, the ones who rarely raised their voices even when millions were at stake, had gone on record. Until further review, all operational authority granted to the CSO is hereby suspended, pending an investigation into procedural misconduct. That was the nice version. What they meant was, get her out of the damn way before she sets off another legal grenade. Apparently, the turning point hadn't been the financials or even the missed deadlines. It was the receipts. Timestamps don't lie. Once they realized the emails weren't just harmless chatter, but actual legal barricades she'd bulldozed through in a fit of ego, the mood in the room calcified. No one used the word nepotism, but it was pulsing under every syllable like a bass line in a bad remix. That afternoon, I got the call. Not from the founder, not from the daughter, who was reportedly taking a wellness day, but from the board's external legal advisor, smooth voice, expensive vocabulary, kind of guy who never blinked on Zoom. "Aaron," he said, "we've reviewed your documentation. The board is requesting your assistance as a short-term consultant to address outstanding legal exposure. There's also interest in a broader compliance evaluation, if you're willing." I let that sit for a beat. It wasn't just an offer, it was an admission. They needed me, not liked, not celebrated, needed. Because the person who had been protecting them wasn't a name on a roster. Finally understood I'd been the entire firewall. I didn't shout, didn't gloat, didn't ask for an apology. I simply said my rates have changed. There was a pause, a small one. Then understood. "Please send your proposal. I already had it ready. Line itemed, indexed. Market rates plus a 25% surcharge for retroactive stupidity." I added a clause requiring direct reporting to the board, no intermediaries, no strategy team shenanigans, no niece of the founder playing gatekeeper. This time, I wasn't a fixer, I was a vendor, and vendors don't ask permission to do what needs to be done. The email went out with the subject line, "Proposal Emergency Legal Consulting Aaron R." It included a timeline, deliverables, and a simple footnote, "Priority response required due to prior delays in action." I CC'd outside counsel again, not out of spite, just to keep things clean. 23 minutes later, got the signed agreement back. The COO added a note at the bottom, "Appreciate your willingness to step in." I didn't reply. I didn't need appreciation. I needed access. Within the hour, I was looped into a secure folder of legal review documents. Half of them mirrored the drafts I'd written weeks ago. Some were laughably bad rewrites from interns who'd clearly Googled how to sound like a lawyer. I went to work, this time on my terms. No after-hours Slack messages, no pretending I was just helping out. They'd wanted to erase me. Instead, they signed my contract. They thought firing me had ended something. Instead, it formalized it. Because now I wasn't inside the system, bound by org charts and office politics. Now I was the surgeon you call when the bleeding won't stop and you're out of clean towels. I wasn't back. I was above. And the ones who'd tried to bury me, they were about to find out I'd kept the blueprints. Meeting began without introductions. No chit-chat, no agenda slides, no icebreaker polls. Just a blunt subject line, emergency session, legal risk review, and a hardwired Zoom link that didn't even allow participants to change their screen names. There were only 6 people on the call: the founder, the board chair, the CFO, the external legal counsel, a grim-faced note-taker with a blinking cursor, and me. I didn't have video on. I didn't need it. Knew I was there? The lawyer started speaking without preamble. "There's one final document we need to review, dated October 13th, labeled Urgent Cease and Desist V and K Duplication. This was drafted by Aaron Reynolds, stored on internal drives, and based on metadata, never reviewed or signed by legal." He paused just long enough to make them squirm. "Per instruction, I'll read the document aloud, line by line." Click. The sound of a PDF opening might as well have been the funeral bell. Infringement date: observed 10/12 Marketplace, global by net. Subject: unauthorized duplication of proprietary product design, branding, packaging language, and digital asset reuse. He read the intro slowly, methodically, letting each clause drop like a gavel. "This letter serves as formal notice that your use of product name, design, and trade dress constitutes a direct violation of U.S. intellectual property law, specifically under Title 15, Section 1125 A of the Lanham Act." No one spoke. Not even the founder, whose knuckles had turned white somewhere around unauthorized duplication. "This matter has been internally documented and time-stamped, with full evidentiary backup stored in redundant cloud systems. Should you fail to cease all infringing activity within 5 business days of receipt, our legal team is prepared to initiate immediate litigation and seek damages as allowable under both statutory and common law." Silence. The lawyer didn't flinch. He kept reading. "Including, but not limited to, monetary damages, injunctive relief, destruction of infringing goods, and attorney's fees. Reached the final line. We urge you to treat this notice with the seriousness it warrants. This is your final opportunity to correct course before legal action becomes unavoidable. Click. The document closed. The screen stayed still. No one moved. Then, finally, the board chair leaned into his microphone, voice as hollow as the conference table he probably wanted to crawl under. What happens now? I clicked unmute. Didn't clear my throat. Didn't raise my voice. Just said now, you hope they haven't filed first, and muted myself again. I didn't have to explain the implications. They all knew. If V&K had already filed a preemptive claim, maybe even trademarked under the stolen branding, then our legal ground went from rock solid to mudslide. Months of litigation. Lost protections. Potential damages that made the $2M estimate look like a rounding error. The founder closed his eyes. The CFO started typing. The chairman sat perfectly still, blinking like maybe if he stayed motionless, the fire wouldn't see him. They'd read it. They'd heard it. They'd felt the cold weight of every ignored warning, every buried draft, every "will deal with that later" finally coming due. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need an apology. I didn't need the daughter dragged in by security or forced to issue a groveling statement about misunderstandings and unfortunate escalations. Because this wasn't personal anymore. It was structural. And they broke it. They'd fired the one person who knew where the leaks were, then blamed the flood on the rain. I just let them read the forecast, line by line. You're the real stars of the corporate jungle. Thanks for watching. Hit subscribe, or I'll flick the switch on your old cubicle memories.